Hello friends. This is Fiction Quest. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Hitsugaya became Naruto's mentor in Konoha. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. A village was in chaos. Dead bodies lay scattered after getting swatted away easily by a nine-tailed demon fox. Trees were scattered all over like toothpicks on the floor. There was silence everywhere, as though the world had been paused by a remote control. Yet, in a room, it was so much unlike the outside. A room with only candles that held light was filled with babies crying. A lone figure stood above the child as it cried. Time just slowed as the lone figure reached down toward the baby and whispered into the infant's ear. "I hope you made the right decision, Namikaze Minato." The lone figure turned around and saw nothing. "I'm down here." Minato looked down to see a boy about the age of 11 with white, spiky hair and sharp, blue-green eyes staring at him with his hands crossed. Apparently the kid had problems with people criticizing his height. "Heh. Didn't see you there," the man said, scratching the back of his head. "Are you sure you want your son to?" the boy started. "I don't want anyone's child to be faced with this burden," Minato stated. The boy understood. It was because the man was an honorable one that did anything to protect his precious people. "You should get going. I'll meet you there," the boy said as he walked towards the baby, looking over the seals that were prepared. Just as before Minato left the room, he asked, "Are you sure you're a Shinigami? I thought they were taller." He laughed, making sure he teased someone for the last time. The boy twitched and Minato left just in time before the boy aimed something at his head. His laughter lingered in the room. The boy looked over the seals for any mistakes and strengthened it more with his own. He looked up in a few minutes. "It's about time. Sayonara, Naruto." Moments later, the outside world was finally back to life as the Yondaime in Gamabunta, who had the Yondaime on top of his head, appeared on the battlefield against the Kyuubi. Seconds later, the same boy earlier appeared next to the Yondaime without a sound. "What kept you?" "Nothing much. Just wanted to make sure your seals were okay and strengthened them." "Really? And here I thought you weren't going to make it." The boy twitched at the comment, using all of his control not to strangle the joking man in front of him. If anyone had heard their talk, not like anyone could, they would have thought the man and the boy were crazy, talking so casually with a demon that could create many tsunamis with just a swing of its tails right in front of them, ready to lunge at the pair. "Let's take down this old furball." Hitsugaya Tushiru smiled. He was starting to like this man. It reminded him of a certain someone. 3 years later, another meeting in Soul Society was driving every high-ranking Shinigami crazy. They were having at least 2 meetings each day, one in the early morning and one late in the evening. Why? There was only one reason: too many hollows popping up in 2 odd places. No matter how many times one of them was cut down, 10 more hollows would pop up in the killed hollow's place. The 2 odd places was even more odd than the fact that hollows pop up like daisies, not like hollows or daisies. Location number 1 was Karakura Town, which happened to be the next Jureichi 1 location. Location number 2 was just a small, or not so small depending on how you look at it, subdimensional pocket in Japan that only the Taikos would know about. Casualties were increasing each day as the number of hollows increased. The only division enjoying this was, of course, the 11th division, but it was hell week for the 4th division. But that matter wasn't the big issue today. The big issue today was what to do about the other location, the subdimension pocket in Japan that only the Taikos know about. And since the current meeting that our characters are stuck in are for both Taikos and Fukutaichis, the topic was held at the end of the meeting after the Karakura Town issue and other issues that were discussed. As for the other locations issue, everyone but Soifong Taiko, Unohana Taiko, Kuchiki Taiko, Kyoraka Taiko, Hitsugaya Taiko, Zaraki Taiko, Kusajishi Fukutaichu, Kuretsuchi Taiko, Kuretsuchi Fukutaichu, and Yukataki Taiko can leave. Everyone, who includes Sasaki Fukutaichu, Umeda Fukutaichu, Ichimaru Taiko, Kira Fukutaichu, Katetsu Fukutaichu, Aizen Taiko, Hinamori Fukutaichu, Abarai Fukutaichu, Komamura Taiko, Iba Fukutaichu, Ise Fukutaichu, Tusen Taiko, Hisagi Fukutaichu, Matsumoto Fukutaichu, and the 2/3 seats, Katetsu and Katsubaki, that follow Yuki-chan around, trying to get the Fukutaichu seat, left the 10 said people. Hinamori and Matsumoto walked out of the first division doors, both having the same intentions. Hunt down Tushiru when he comes out and squeeze out the information from him about the subdimensional pocket in Japan that didn't knew about, and while they're at it, they'll ask him about what he wants for his birthday with indirect questions. His birthday was in 3 days and they still had no idea what to get him. At least, they got Yukitaki's present and the Shuru-chan's party planned about a week ago. Maybe they'll get him a month's supply of fresh, sweet watermelons. But they both didn't know that Hitsugaya wouldn't be coming out in quite a while, and so would the others. Deep in the forests of Konoha, another day was over and snow was still falling but much softer than before. It sounds strange hearing Konoha having snow. For the first time in the year, Konoha was snowing. It started out as a light snowfall 3 days ago that had everyone enchanted by how soft and pretty it looked when it came down, but on the second day, it turned into a blizzard and continued until a few hours ago. Now the snow was falling more angelic-like than ever in history of Konoha. It was like staring at a postcard picture. So real yet so fake. This day was like every other normal day. Or at least as normal as a ninja village can get. It was just another peaceful day, therefore the Sandaime was free from the wretched paperwork and all the other events that a Hokage must do. And what's the best thing to do with snow and free time to relax? Of course, it would be to spend time with a certain sunny boy that had no one to play with. And that was exactly what the Sandaime did. Uzumaki Naruto and Sarutobi Hiruzen were having a nice, harmless game of a snowball fight. The old man said that for each snowball that he got hit with, he'll pay for a bowl of ramen at Ichiraku's. Also, for each snowball that Naruto got hit with, the Sandaime would -1 from the number of ramen bowls that Naruto had, whose score was 50 thanks to his really effective, innocent, puppy faces. Currently, the blonde 4-year-old boy wasn't running away from the old man, he was running away from the nameless. Though they are nameless, they'll pop up in the now and then, bullies that decided that it would be fun to throw snowballs on their moving target. Whoever said that snowballs were harmless, didn't experience this. Naruto was covered in snow and a bit of mud from the snowballs that the nameless bullies threw. His knees were soaked from the snow and bruised from tripping over the snow-hidden tree roots. It was getting colder and night was approaching. Naruto turned around when he heard rustling from behind the bushes behind him. He prepared himself for another snowball with his own. As soon as the figure stood up, Naruto launched the snowball at his supposed attacker. Gah! Who did that? The familiar old, white hair and wrinkles appeared from the bush. Oji-chan. 45. I'm just guessing that 5 years old would be around that. Pounds of Naruto launched himself at the Hokage. There were these 3 meanies, and the rest of his words became muffled, trying to wipe the tears that escaped from his eyes with the Sandaime's shirt. The Sarutobi patted Naruto on his head. Once again, there was rustling of leaves behind Naruto. Was that starting to be a common thing now? After 5 minutes of silent tension, Naruto went over with a random stick he found buried in the snow and poked into the bushes. Poke. 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 Silence. Poke. 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 Squishy. Oji-san, there's something squishy in there. Naruto withdrew the wooden stick and on the end of the twig was a red, sticky liquid that everyone knew as blood. Eyes widen, Naruto, dropping the blood-stained stick, backed away from the bush. The older of the two stepped forward to investigate. Is it a body? A dead animal? Or worse, an injured fellow shinobi? The older of the two pushed the branches that blocked their view away and saw snow slightly stained with blood. Lying there was a child about the age of 2 with bruises and cuts that looked similar to what Naruto would have when the villagers decided to play with the demon. The hair almost went unnoticed since its color was as white as the snow on the ground. A black scarf covered the bottom portion of the face. A black bloodied cloak covered most of the boy's body, but the bruises and cuts were seeable. Tucked between the arms of the child was a small blue dragon-looking stuffed animal. What kind of person would do this to a child? Naruto sniffed and sneezed, bringing the Sandaime out of his thoughts. It was getting cold and they should probably do something other than just stare. He lifted the child off the snow and handed the injured child to Naruto, who was soon held by the old man. With both children safely tucked under his arms, the Sandaime, as fast as his old bones can carry him, immediately headed straight for the hospital. He could have sworn that he saw someone with long white hair walked away as soon as they found the child, as though the person wanted to make sure the child was in safe hands. Was it his imagination? Flashback to the moment after the meeting was supposedly over for most of the Taikos and Fukutaichis. Shortly after all the other members of the meeting left, the 10 said people were confused as to why they remained behind. The extremely old man began talking, silencing the whole room from its whispering. Hitsugaya Taiko will be sent alone to the subdimensional pocket in Japan to fix the hollow problem for an uncertain amount of time, and that one sentence set off numerous questions that slowly began to sound like the usual number of annoying questions that Taikos ask every meeting with everyone else in the room instead of less than half of the usual. Why am I the only one going? Hitsugaya, why won't someone tell me what is this subdimensional pocket in Japan that everyone talks about? Kusajishi. Then what am I doing here? Basically everyone else. To prepare Hitsugaya Taiko to survive in the subdimensional pocket in Japan, Soifong Taiko, Unohana Taiko, Kuchiki Taiko, Kyoraka Taiko, Zaraki Taiko, Kusajishi Fukutaichu, Kuretsuchi Taiko, Kuretsuchi Fukutaichu, and Yukataki Taiko will be the only people that should know about his mission to the subdimensional pocket in Japan. Or as some might prefer it as, disappearance. Hitsugaya Taiko's mission is simple. Objective 1 is to minimize the damage made by hollows and get rid of them until Objective 2 is over with. Objective 2 is to find the source and stop it from attracting any more hollows. Yamamoto continued, ignoring the other questions and outraged comments. Isn't the subdimensional pocket in Japan, too, the place with the Ryatsu-like powers and the Edo trap time place? Soifong questioned. Yachiru immediately thought of ninjas jumping around on the rooftops blasting with Kido. Indeed. Since the people in the subdimensional pocket in Japan has slightly different Ryatsu powers, Kuretsuchi made a new Gigai that will be able to adapt to the Ryatsu's uses. Kuretsuchi began explaining about the Gigai he made, with his extremely creepy voice of his, and by the time, which by the way took about 3 hours, he finished, no one was able to comprehend what just came out of his mouth because apparently there was a very entertaining fly that flew around distracting the listeners. So having no choice, the 12th Division Taiko gave the manual, which was about the size of the monthly stack of paperwork that Taikos get, to Hitsugaya to digest. Now that Kuretsuchi Taiko has explained, Hitsugaya Taiko has 3 days to prepare. Tomorrow, Soifong Taiko will teach the necessaries of the shinobi's knowledge and training, and Unohana Taiko will be teaching him advanced healing Kido. After that, Kusajishi Fukutaichu will help him with acting skills. And that's basically it for preparations with the others. Hitsugaya Taiko, stop by later to pick up the details of the mission, now dismiss. They were all about to comment about the sudden mission for the young prodigy, but to their dismay, Yamamoto was already snoring away at the odd time. Hitsugaya was anything but calm. He was supposed to spend an uncertain amount of time in the subdimensional pocket in Japan in a Gigai that turned out to have some really weird functions. 3. And he was supposed to be ready in 3 days, along with the lessons from the. So basically the next 3 days, he spent his time doing the following. Day 1 after the mission was assigned, he was being taught the hand seals used in the subdimensional pocket in Japan and other things he needed to survive in the ninja world, along with a few techniques that might be useful by Soifong. He didn't spend too much time being stuck in the training area of the 2nd Division because 1. He was a tensai, and 2. It was almost like he knew them already. Along with the lessons from Soifong, were a few hours with Unohana, who taught him quite a number of advanced healing Kido that might turn out to be useful. Day 2. He was getting lessons from Kusajishi Yachiru on how to ACT, or be a child. It took a lot of self-convincing that he might really needed it, but for Kami-sama's sake, his reputation will be ruined if someone caught him trying to act childish. He could just imagine the faces already when people hear about it. The second half of the second day was being drowned by information in the library with Yukataki, Kuchiki, and Shunsui helping. Day 3. It was finally last day. He'll have a normal day in Seirei for at least 5 years was like hell. Packing equipment and papers he would need in a small stuffed animal. It looks like Hiranmara, that was modified to fit many things. Was horrifying, especially with Yukataki along with Yachiru, who both tried to fill it with candy. Unohana. who insisted in packing first aid that were not available in the subdimensional pocket in Japan. Kuretsuchi, who wanted to play a recorder to record all of the information in the subdimensional pocket in Japan so that he could experiment with the knowledge gained. Shunsui, who tried to put sake in there because his excuse was Hitsugaya, will never be able to drink any in that gigai, and you'll never know when it comes in handy. Soi Fong, who wanted to make sure he doesn't forget anything she taught him, so she gave him a tiny booklet that contained a review of what she taught. Kuchiki, who gave fancy candy and many varieties of, for some reason, scarves, and Yamamoto, who insisted that Hitsugaya will continue to drink tea and keep up with his paperwork. The many things included above had still managed to fit in along with Hitsugaya's whole wardrobe, paperwork, his cell phone, his tiny scrapbook of pictures of his friends, food that he can't find in where he was going, Gigai-related stuff, and mission-related stuff, along with a mysterious package from a mysterious person. And all those left only a tiny dent in the stuffed animal, which currently looks like an overstuffed stuffed animal. The only problem with that was Hiranmara and Hitsugaya were outraged at the sight of the stuffed animal. After a convincing battle from Zaraki Kenpachi, Hitsugaya, who was unconscious at that time because a certain pink-headed Fukutaichu decided to club him in the head with a metal bat, and Yukataki were on their way to the subdimensional pocket, and to be specific, they headed toward Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. End of flashback. Hitsugaya could have sworn that he had the worst luck. Of all the short and powerful, high-ranking Shinigami, meaning besides him, there was Kusajishi, he had to take this troublesome mission to protect the troublesome location from being attacked by troublesome hollows that continue to increase its numbers as one was cut down, like the situation with Karakura Town, and at the same time, find out why the hollows are attracted to Konoha like fruit flies to bananas. I swear. Each time I eat a banana in the summer or when it's not cold, there's always fruit flies swooping in on the peeled banana. Plus he has to look after the possible cause of the attraction of the hollows, since Hitsugaya was partially the reason that this cause was the way it is, and that meant babysitting, and since he was the only young-looking taiko lying around, he had to be a pint-sized baby, which degraded him even more than having to stay in the living world for as long as possible until the problem is at least solved halfway or fixed until they could find a permanent solution. And would have to wait for about a decade before he was back to his ordinary, which means he has to wait about 10 years for it, and until then, he had to act like a regular child with abnormal knowledge that someone his age, 1-year-old, shouldn't know, and power that no living person should have. Was Kami-sama punishing him because he died early and became a taiko earlier than everyone else? Or was it just the Central 46's way of punishing him for sealing the Kyuubi into a baby when he was supposed to be on his working no matter what days? The Sandaime Hokage was walking straight for the room that Naruto and the child shared in the hospital. After reading a certain report, he decided to take a break from the mount paperwork that practically towered over the tallest person in Konoha. He needed to check if the reports were true. He paused at the door. Certainly, both patients inside would be asleep, right? Might as well see who the guard is and ask if anything has happened yet. As he opened the door to the room, he expected Naruto, who should be closest to the entrance of the door, sleeping, and the child he and Naruto brought back, to be also sleeping. But when the view of the inside of the room opened before him, he thought he stepped into the wrong room. The guard with his black eyes was staring down on the mysterious child. The child in question was awake and was also staring back at the guard. Normally, the Sarutobi would just dismiss it as a child thing, but the guard wasn't one that would have a staring contest with a 1-year-old baby. The guard belonged to the Uchiha clan, and Uchihas weren't known to be, having staring contests with babies. It was even peculiar because of the identity of the Uchiha. The Uchiha was Itachi, who was at this moment was 10 and had reached Chunin rank. The mysterious child had the Hokage thinking one thought: he's not an ordinary child. Why? Many would ask if they weren't at the scene. It was simple. There were 5 reasons why. 1. There was no sane person in the shinobi world that would stare at an Uchiha's eyes. You can never tell if they will cast a genjutsu. 2. No one could stare that long at Uchiha Itachi's eyes. People would freeze up before a second pass, let alone a staring contest. 3. Now that the child was clean, the body features of the child were more visible. No one that the Sandaime had seen would have such soft and angelic-like hair. Not even a certain Icha reader had hair as white and as soft like that. The eyes were even more intriguing. It was a shade of green-blue. Or was it blue-green? Or teal? Or is it turquoise? 4. After getting a clearer view of the child's condition, there was something that looked suspicious. No normal child had a dragon. Hint that it looks like Hiranmara. Tattoo like going from somewhere below the collarbone to midway cheekbone. Sure, there were weird things in the shinobi continent, but things like this weren't common on a 1-year-old. The report about the boy mentioned something about the tattoo-like marks on the boy omitted a strange energy. 5. After leaving Naruto and the child in the care of trusted hands, Sarutobi went back to the site where they saw the abandoned child. The only things left in the site that held any evidence of the scene was 4 things. The blood stained in the pure white snow, footprints of Naruto and himself, the stick with the tip covered in warm blood from Naruto's use of poking, and something he didn't notice in the first place. It was a katana, longer than the ones that the Anbu uses, close to 4 feet. Its hilt was a light blue color, and the feature that really stands out was the guard that was the shape of a 4-pointed star. The katana now laid currently in his office. If no one is suspicious after those 5 reasons, then something is definitely wrong with the person. It became creepier when they both turned to the old man and had the look on their face that said, "What?" The Uchiha guard disappeared into a corner, leaving the child and the old man some privacy. But wait, a 1-year-old wouldn't be able to talk much. The child stared back with his eyes. The sandame nearly stepped back. Those eyes weren't something a child at his age should have. They were sharp and seemed to hold knowledge beyond his age. If only he knew. Great. Sarutobi, what did you get yourself into? Of course someone his age wouldn't be able to talk. Stupid. Okay, I'll just pretend I'm talking to a younger version of Naruto. That'll have to do until he's old enough to talk if he remembers when he gets older. So the troubled Hokage pointed to himself and sounded out the syllables of his name. Sa. Ru. Tu. Bai Hai. Ru. Z. N. The child continued staring, but this time with a look that said, "Are you stupid?" The victim of the eyes winced. This child made him look like he was talking to a child that knew how to speak but didn't say so, leaving him act like an idiot. Hitsugaya Tushiru woke up aching in pain and finds himself soon having a staring contest with a stranger that reminded him of someone he met while he was shopping for clothes, which meant basically anyone who stares at him thinking why elementary kid was shopping by himself. Somewhere along the staring contest, Hitsugaya noticed that Hiranmara wasn't by his side and was probably picked up. Barely 10 minutes had passed when another person came bursting in. This time it was an old guy that assumed was someone important in the village because of the way he barged in. The only people he knew that did that was the older and more experienced in a high position to do that, like a certain person he knew that likes giving him candy and another person that wears an annoying shade of pink. As soon as the old old man started to introduce himself, Tushiru gaped mentally in horror. Was this what he had to face for about 10 years? Why? Is this village going to be like him, talking to me like I'm still a baby? Tushiru. You do know that the Gigai you are in is a 1-year-old baby, right? Babies at that age shouldn't be able to talk like what you're thinking. Hiranmara's faint but hearable voice mumbled in his mindscape. Oh, it must have been Zaraki's fault for beating me too hard. Now that I think about it, a 1-year-old shouldn't be able to write, and even if they could, I can't move my fingers. Damn that Zaraki. I think this should be the right time to drop a hint that you're not just a normal abandoned baby. The window next to Hitsugaya went up with a bang, causing both Itachi and the Hokage to jump, preparing for an attack. Instead of an attack, snow drifted into the room until a small pile appeared along the window sill. Sarutobi walked up to the window sill to see kanji written in the snow. Rifan gu dong shi lang. Habantani fuyushiru. 6. Hokage-sama, I think you mean Hitsugaya Tushiru. Itachi, for once, raised an eyebrow. Was this the power of the child that he spent minutes trying to figure out? From the look on the child's face, it did look like it was his doing. About a week after the name incident, Hitsugaya was, well, let's just say he was bored out of his mind. In his current body, there was no way that he could do anything productive. Paperwork was out of the question. I mean, who has ever seen a 1-year-old exactly write something that looks legible? The thought of not keeping up with this paperwork load was growing into a big concern that when he returns, he'll be buried under it and would have to work for days before getting the mount paperwork under control. Matsumoto would most likely be ignoring most of the paperwork and spend the time doing what she usually does. If only there was a way to smuggle paperwork to where he was. His injuries were almost healed, which just happens to be faster than an average 1-year-old. The boy, Naruto, the boy practically introduced himself in a Matsumoto-like way when he woke up and saw Tushiru, stayed with Tushiru although his minor bruises from the hard snowballs were already gone. Sure, the blonde boy was entertaining, but Hitsugaya couldn't help but feel that Yachiru and Naruto would get along really well, especially in bothering the Tensei. It was like being stuck with Yachiru all over again. So he spent the miserable days listening to the boy Naruto talk, and when Naruto wasn't talking, Hitsugaya meditated trying to find Hiranmara and occasionally testing his control of the power that the subdimensional pocket uses, also known as chakra. It was day 10 since he first stepped into the subdimensional pocket in Japan. Hollows were indeed popping up like daisies, which were unusually in the area. The subdimensional pocket was protected by a barrier from the beginning of its time, and hollows were a really rare sight. The people in the subdimensional were far from being able to see any spirits, but instead of Ryotsu, they had a watered-down version of Ryotsu that was not even comparable to any Shinigami. The only things that were capable of being able to attract hollows were the famed tailed beasts, especially the Kyuubi no Yoko, which was most likely the reason why he was stuck in this mission. It's about time I do something official. Deciding against just getting out of his Gigai, which if he did then panic would arise. I don't think that I need to explain, but I'll just say this for those who don't get it. The thought of people panicking because his Gigai was no longer breathing, since there was no longer a soul in the Gigai, caused Hitsugaya to pull out his stuffed dragon and pull out his supply of Gikongan. 1. In a dragon dispenser. With a glance around, he popped one into his mouth. It took about 30 minutes for our main character to find the Hokage's office. Why did it take him that long? It was all to blame on a certain green spandex-wearing shinobi with a bowl haircut. If that spandex-wearing guy got a mini-me, Hitsugaya would have never made it out alive. He slid it open the window of the Hokage's office, where he sensed Hiranmara's presence the most. On a desk in the room laid Hiranmara wrapped in a black cloth. And sitting behind of the desk that held Hiranmara was the village's leader, the man that talked to him like a child, the Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. Digging into his stuffed dragon, he pulled out a bag of powder specially made by a former 12th Division Taiko. Hitsugaya took a handful of the purple powder, tossed it over the old geezer, and watched the effects. Seconds later, the old geezer, the Hokage, blinked twice and sneezed. When he looked up from his version of mount paperwork, Sarutobi saw another person in his office. A person that he didn't sense until now. "Who are you?" he demanded of the stranger. Behind the stacks of mount paperwork was someone was about 4 feet 4-ish. If he hadn't stand up, he would have never seen the intruder from behind of mount paperwork. The white spiked up hair looked awfully familiar, along with the unique eyes that weren't really describable. It was like looking at an older version of the child, Hitsugaya Tushiru. The clothes weren't something he saw around Konoha or any other countries. It was a black hakama and black kimono, and over it was a white haori. "It is not really that hard. You already know my name. Read the letter." The stranger tossed an envelope neatly onto mount paperwork. The voice sounded much more mature than one as young and short should have. It had a sense of coldness in it, but at the same time it wasn't threatening cold. Sarutobi grabbed the letter and started skimming over the contents. He looked up in surprise and confusion. "Hollows? Shinigami? What in the world is this?" He watched as the stranger sat himself down in an empty seat that wasn't filled with part of mount paperwork. The last time he has heard of the word Shinigami, it was when Minato used that jutsu. He expected a Shinigami to look a bit more death-like. "This will probably take a few minutes to explain, but I'm here on a mission that involves your village and protecting it from attacks from invisible enemies. I'm pretty sure you have faced casualties where an invisible enemy would attack and no one was able to see the attacker, right?" The Sandaime Hokage nodded. "Over the past few weeks, there has been attacks where the attack was invisible. Even the Hyugas weren't able to see the attackers. Those were caused by hollows who are fallen souls that weren't saved Shinigami. It's my job to protect the village until I find the source of the problem that attracts the hollows here. Normally this sub-dimensional pocket wouldn't be a problem because of its barrier. However, something went wrong with it, so I'm here until I fix the problem. And the rest of the conversation went on about explaining hollows and the Shinigami's job, which I will not mention at all because it's boring. Not once did the Shinigami mention where he was staying. Let me get this straight. You were sent here to protect Konoha until you find the source of the problems, and that might take a while because of all the energy of chakra being used as floating around. Until then, you'll take care of the hollows' attacks. A nod from the Shinigami confirmed this. Do you mind telling me your name? You seem to have left your name out, Sarutobi questioned. The vertically challenged Shinigami paused before looking out the window, hearing the horrid cry of a hollow. And the said hollow came crashing into the room, breaking the window and scattering Mount Paperwork in the process. The Sandame gasped in horror when Mount Paperwork came crashing down. The hollow turned out to be a tiny one. The Shinigami lifted his forefinger and said, Hado Yan Byakurai, 2. A concentrated bolt of lightning incinerated the mini hollow before it did any damage. Was that a hollow? It didn't look like much. Before the Shinigami could answer, 2 Junins came bursting through the door. I'm okay. The 2 Junins left the room after getting dismissed, not even noticing the Shinigami. Not like they could anyway. Sarutobi turned his gaze at the Shinigami. They weren't be able to see you. Why? Originally you wouldn't have been able to see me. No one in this village. Heck, even the whole subdimensional pocket couldn't see me, hollows, or any spirits. It was thanks to this powder that you were able to see me. However, the effects only last an hour and shouldn't be used more than once a week. The Shinigami held up a purple pouch, showing the powder to the curious Hokage. I'll get something that'll help you see hollows without having to rely on the powder. But right now, I have some place to get to. The Shinigami grabbed the katana off his desk and jumped out the window. The Hokage followed him out, and boy, did he regret doing that. A wretched smell reached his nose. Standing in front of them was a huge hollow, identified by the hole in the chest. Ha 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 ha. I can't believe my luck. A Shinigami, and a short one too. The Shinigami grimaced and looked annoyed. Not a talkative one. I'll enjoy eating you. The Sandame looked alarmed. Was this Shinigami, as short as he was, capable of defeating an enemy more than 5 times his size? I can't believe I would bump into the hollow that tried to kill a certain Go Bantai Fukutaichu, Hinamori Momo, and Ju Bantai Fukutaichu, Matsumoto Rangaku. It'll be my pleasure to kill you. Melikatone. 3. No one can go around harming a friend of mine and escapes without punishment. The Shinigami unsheathed the katana that Sarutobi found near the boy that was supposedly still in the hospital with Naruto. The Sandame felt the urge to help the Shinigami, but also felt that he shouldn't interfere. It was the Shinigami's job anyway. But when the hollow Melikatone mentioned that he can injure a vice captain, Sarutobi felt like jumping in to save the vertically challenged Shinigami. Of course, all that stopped when he felt a foreign energy held him in place. He could see the energy flaring around the Shinigami like ice. Soden ni Zace, Hiranmara. 4. The Shinigami whispered as a dragon flew from the tip of the katana and froze the surprised hollow. The hollow was frozen to where it stood. If you ever escape from here, you'd better be careful not to mess with any of my friends, especially Hinamori or Matsumoto. Remember the name that told you that. Jubantai Taiko no Hitsugaya Tushiru. 5. Both the hollow and Hokage widened their eyes before the hollow shattered into pieces of ice. Omake 1. To do or not to do, to see or not to see. After deciding against just leaving the hospital in his current state, Hitsugaya left through the hospital's window via Shinigami firm. Maybe it was just his imagination or Yachiru's influence, but he had the sudden urge just to show up in front of the Hokage in his 1-year-old Gigai. The thought of a 1-year-old suddenly speaking like he has been for plus 10 years was funny. The day a 1-year-old could talk and write and walk like an adult was like the day Kuretsuchi Mayuri actually doing something useful. But really, Hitsugaya could just imagine his mature and childless voice speaking through a 1-year-old body, scaring anyone who had listened. There was also the thought of a 1-year-old crawling. 1-year-olds don't walk yet. Through the streets to the Hokage's tower. The thought flew away when a flash of green run by. Was that what he thought he saw? The green stopped just enough for him to see spandex. Oh my Kami-sama. Was his eyes planning with him? The spandex-wearing bowl haircut disgrace of a man's image came back again, even clearer than before. Hiranmara. Tell me I'm not dreaming. The hollow that once stood there was destroyed by the deadly ice from the Shinigami, Hitsugaya Tushiru. The sky had started snowing again, the Hokage noticed. Was this the Shinigami's abilities? That would explain why ice flowed out of the katana, and if the Shinigami really were a certain recently abandoned boy, then that would explain why the snow was able to spell the name. Sarutobi shivered. Snow wasn't really common around Konoha at all. Do you mind if we get back inside before it gets cold? The Shinigami sheathed his katana and tied it so that the katana was on his back. That was when the shinobi noticed that if the Shinigami held it by his waist, the katana would have been dragging on the ground. You're really short to have such a long katana. Sarutobi shivered as the Shinigami glared at him. He could have sworn that the temperature dropped a few noticeable degrees. Once back in the warm office, the Sandame started asking questions until he couldn't breathe from talking so fast. You don't need to know those answers to those questions. You just need to know that as long as I am here, then you don't need to worry about the hollow problems anymore. The Shinigami paused before speaking again. The effects of the powder should be running out soon. I'll visit again to give you a more effective way to see hollows and me, yeah. The white-haired Shinigami disappeared from the Sandame's sight, signaling the end of the effects of the mysterious powder, before he could ask about the name along with a number of other questions involving the term Shinigami and the Shinigami himself. Many of the questions include how the afterlife is like, what was the thing that the Shinigami used to kill the first hollow, and what is with the katana? And most of all, why was the boy Shinigami so cold and stoic, and how did the boy get the air of authority when he should be around 10 years old? Weird, his eyes seem really cold throughout the entire introduction and explanation. The Sandame sighed as he tried to rejuvenate Mount paperwork but failed, so instead he decided to take a nice short break. Meanwhile, Hitsugaya Tushiru, also known as the Shinigami that was part of the reason that Mount paperwork was deformed, was taking a detour. It's been a while since he has been in Konoha. The last time he was here, it wasn't as peaceful as it was a few years ago. Maybe that blonde was still here if he wasn't eaten by a hollow yet. After taking down at least a dozen minor hollows, the Tensai Shinigami found what he was looking for. No, it wasn't a person. Maybe it was, considering that the place he found had faces carved on it. The highest place he could find was that mountain with all the former faces of the village's leader carved on it. But when he arrived at a nice spot to look at the sky, there was someone already there. And Hitsugaya found it really ironic. Their sleeping was a spirit that had the same face as the carved face he was sleeping on. Not wanting to disturb him, Hitsugaya took a spot far enough from the person and soon got lost in his thoughts. However, the peaceful moment didn't last long when a face popped in front of Hitsugaya's view of the snowy clouds and sun hiding from behind the clouds. It's been a while since I've seen a Shuru-chan. How old are you, old man? Hitsugaya jolted up with twitching eyebrows at the two words, Shuru-chan, and old man. Who are you calling old man, blonde? The blonde laughed and then froze for a whole minute. The white hair, those sea-green eyes that freezes you to the very soul. The short figure for someone who was very powerful, and most of all the eyebrow-twitching entertainment was all familiar to the blonde. You're that short guy from 3 years ago. What are you doing back here? Don't worry. I'm not here to take you away, Namikaze. Hitsugaya reassured, merely knowing what the blonde was thinking. Oh, so what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be wherever Shinigamis live? It's really none of your business, and it's not like you can do anything about it. Hitsugaya's blunt reply sparked the curiosity in the Namikaze. What do you mean it's none of my business and that I can't do anything about it? Of course, I would do something if a Shinigami decides to pop up in the village I sworn to protect, although it seems pretty obvious that I'd try to find out why before the Shinigami blasts me off to someplace beyond the dead. Hitsugaya turned his gaze away from Minato Namikaze and looked up at the skies. You do know it's impossible for you to leave the village, let alone what you people call it as continent, unless I want to do something drastic. Then you won't be able to move on at all. Remember that this was part of the deal. Do you mind explaining it to me again? I was sorta busy when I replied. Minato stretched the back of his head nervously when he saw the twitching of eyebrows again from the Shinigami boy. Any deal made with a Shinigami will take the dealer's living life in exchange for the ceiling. The soul of the dealer will stay around like the other souls. The soul of the dealer can basically move around like any other spirits, but unlike the others, They can't move on, nor can they move to any other dimensions. That means no moving on and going back into the life cycle. You'll stay unseen by living people and watch others die or move on. That's the price of using that jutsu. You can't interfere with anyone's business. There are only 3 ways you can move on. One is that the Shinigami that deal with you is dead, and yes, Shinigamis can die, but it would take a fatal wound to kill us. 2 is that the Shinigami can no longer use its power, and therefore there is no power over the contract. The last way is that a Shinigami willingly frees the dealer. It doesn't matter if it wasn't the original Shinigami that did the sealing. But for a Shinigami to do that would mean either to die, or if the Shinigami is strong enough to avoid death, then the Shinigami will no longer have its powers, which mean that she will no longer be a Shinigami. Hitsugaya took a deep breath. It was the longest and fastest, he was saying everything non-stop, thing he had said since he arrived in Konoha. Okay, but that still means that I can watch over Naruto and the village. It's not all that bad, right? Not after a couple of centuries. I don't plan on dying anytime soon, and when I do die, it won't be wasted. Spend a couple of centuries alone and you'll feel it getting to you. Hitsugaya continued to stare at the setting sun, or what's left of it, from behind the fluffy, snowy clouds. It was getting late, and so Hitsugaya stood up to leave after a long period of silence between the two spirits. If he didn't get to his Gigai soon, who knows what disaster he would face when he came back. When the Sandame, who was still on his tiny break from handling Mount paperwork, came around to visit Naruto and his roommate, he really didn't expect anything weird to happen. The room was extremely quiet for evenings. Naruto usually wasn't calm at this hour. Usually the room was filled with Naruto's mumblings about ramen or trying to get his quiet roommate to speak. Ever since Naruto found out that his roommate hadn't made a single peep, it became Naruto's personal mission to make the child talk. No one has yet to hear the abandoned child's voice. No one knew what he was, mute or traumatized, and refuses to make a sound. Peeping into the room, the Sandame found the 2 children sleeping in the cutest way, not as if anyone saw this except for himself and Itachi. The boy, Tushiru, was hugging the blue stuffed dragon that was found with him, while Naruto was sleeping in the chair next to the bed that Tushiru occupied. He had a sudden urge to take a picture of this quiet and peaceful moment. You know, staring at someone when they sleep isn't a polite thing to do. The words appeared before the eyes of the Sandame via the method that was used earlier with the name introduction. So you're not asleep, was the Sandame's short reply. He knew that the child understood him. It was apparent over the time that the Sandame spent around him. For someone who was only 1 year old, Tushiru wasn't a normal 1-year-old. 1-year-olds shouldn't have such a great understanding of people's words. Plus, he had never seen a 1-year write any kanji. Who is this child really? And as though the child had read his thoughts, Tushiru climbed out of bed, which was quite a feat for a 1-year-old. Although watching Tushiru struggle to get down was cute, his eyes told a different story. Just like the boy Shinigami, it held the coldness, authority, and most of all the intelligence behind the sharp eyes. Maybe his eyes were getting old, but he could have sworn that the child flashed an annoyed look of, "Isn't it really obvious?" before Tushiru try being the keyword, to run out the door. But that action led to falling on his butt. The Sandame raised an eyebrow, nearly having the urge to take a picture of the fall, at the awkwardness that fell upon the room. Tushiru pouted, and instead of crawling away, he got up and walked out the door. Nature was calling, and he absolutely won't get out of his Gigai just to go to the bathroom. He just hoped that no one from Soul Society was watching that. But unknown to him, someone, although wasn't considered to be part of Gode 13, was watching and taking pictures for future, blackmail, I meant evidence. While Tushiru really needed to use the bathroom, it also meant that using it was harder, especially in his 1-year-old Gigai. But nature was really calling, and nothing could stop a baby when nature was calling. However, for everything that Hitsugaya does, there's always an annoying obstacle, like trying to reach his bags of green tea from a high cabinet that Matsumoto insists on having. Even going to the bathroom has its own obstacles. Uchiha Itachi, he had learned his name as, was standing in his way, who was staring down at the wide sight before him. "What are you doing out here alone?" When Itachi got no answer, he continued to question the boy, accusing the 1-year-old of his only crime so far. "You're not a normal child. No normal child would be able to write or even recognize kanji at the age 1. And they definitely don't have a mysterious tattoo that emits a weird power. You understand what people are saying but you won't speak or respond. Why? No one would expect a 1-year-old to escape the clutches of someone 9 years older. But Hitsugaya did. While the Uchiha guard was busy questioning him, he made a small shunpo between the legs and into the bathroom, leaving the Uchiha talking to himself. Now if only if he could find a way to the toilet seat. Stepping out of the bathroom, Hitsugaya felt ready just to get this mission over with. The Gigai was really humiliating, and if anyone takes a picture of him while his was in this Gigai, he's willing to do anything to destroy the photos and the person who took them until there wasn't a single atom of them left behind. Damn Kuretsuchi for finding the special Gigai plans and Urahara Kazuki, wherever he was, for developing the special Gigai. Not only was the Gigai causing him problems, but also the people around the village were crazy. Even more wacko than the people in Seirei. The first time he patrolled around the village, he saw this crazy green spandex wearing guy that practically blinded him. And he found even more wacko people that he wished he could just use Kyokuchikan 1 on himself when the mission was over. Personally, he felt that the people here were too nosy for their own good. So far, 2 people questioned his existence in Konoha. The 2 people were the Sandaime Hokage, who felt that he was too kind for a leader, and Uchiha Itachi, who was too much like Hiranmara and himself even though he wouldn't admit it. The number 2 was soon going to be 3 as soon as he opens the door of the bathroom. Hitsugaya bumped into someone as he exited the bathroom and nearly fell again if it wasn't for the person's fast reaction. Be careful next time. You're a Shuru-chan. I never thought I would see another Shuru-chan today, especially for someone as short as you. Wait a second. If I can touch you, does this mean you're also dead? Oh, I almost forgot. My name's Namikaze Mina, too. Minato halted in his mini monologue when he recognized whom he had bumped into. Hitsugaya, who had finally looked up, was practically itching to release Hiranmara on the babbling blonde. If Namikaze continued to call him Shuru-chan, he'll find himself frozen for centuries to come. It's you. Minato could recognize those eyes and hair anyway. No one had pure white hair and such intelligence behind those teal eyes. What are you doing at chibi form? No, wait. Don't tell me this is your real form. Hitsugaya began walking away with eyebrows twitching and hands itching to just freeze the Namikaze into a solid block of ice that not even the sun could reach. Oi! Chato Mat! I never got your name. Minato followed the chibi-fied Shinigami, who was quite a fast walker for someone his age. They stopped at a balcony with absolutely no people around. The balcony was covered in a thin layer of snow and the starry black sky starred down upon them. And the peaceful scene was ruined. Never call me Shuru-chan ever again. It's Hitsugaya Tushiru. And didn't I tell you that my being here has nothing to do with you? So go back to whatever you were doing before I came. Hitsugaya's stoic voice came from the innocent 1-year-old Gigai's body. It seemed all wrong that someone this young-looking had such a cold and intimidating voice. You know I won't stop bothering you unless I find out why you are here. You might as well tell me to. Minato was stopped when Hitsugaya stopped looking at him and stared at the skies. Instead of wondering why I am here, why don't you ask about your son? Hitsugaya half whispered. Have you visited him yet? When he's asleep. If I was alive, none of this would have happened. Bending down to Tushiru's height, he gripped onto the Shinigami's shoulders. Could you do me a favor? Could you watch over him until whatever you're here to do is over with? You don't have to follow him around. Just make sure he doesn't get lonely. For once since Hitsugaya met Minato, he was genuinely serious. Even more than the time he was facing the Kyuubi. Maybe he should. It's getting late. They'll be wondering where I've been. Hitsugaya shrugged the hands off and walked away, leaving Minato in the snow. I'll see what I can do. Couple of days later, Hitsugaya was really dreading the day that dawned upon him. Never in his life had he done this, and even if he needed to, it was usually his Fukutaichu that did it for him, seeing that she enjoyed it more than he did. But there was one lesson he would never forget while he's in Konoha. It was to never ever, absolutely positively never go shopping with a certain old geezer and a certain overly hyperactive orange-wearing blonde. On the previous day, Sarutobi decided that it was about time that Tushiru got his own clothes instead of borrowing Naruto's baby clothes. And it was about time the children left the hospital with Tushiru perfectly fine. It wasn't as if Hitsugaya didn't have his own clothes. They were all packed into mini Hiranmara courtesy of Unohana and Yukitaki. It would have been fine with all the clothes, but it would have become suspicious if he suddenly had clothes that appeared out of nowhere. So that was the reason why Hitsugaya was going to spend a day shopping for his own clothes. Plus, it was a great opportunity to officially introduce his masquerade that he would be staying as during his time here, and maybe find out why a certain unexpected visitor popped in. Stepping out of the hospital room that he and Naruto occupied for the past 2 weeks, Tushiru spotted Sarutobi waiting for the two children to finish changing. Hitsugaya had borrowed Naruto's old clothes, which wasn't, to his surprise, any bright colors, and a black scarf, to hide the strange markings along the side of his face, from the Uchiha guard. Silently, unlike any 1-year-old, Hitsugaya walked up to the old man and stood there with his hands stretched out, holding something black and hopefully useful for the future. The Sandaime looked down, seeing the normally silent child next to him. Huh? What was the child doing? He took the object from the boy to see a pair of funny pink sunglasses that only Guy or someone like him would wear. When he looked up, Sarutobi could have swore that he saw Tushiru mouth the word, later. Not a moment later, Naruto came happily out of the room shouting stuff like, "I'm finally out of that stuffy white room with awful hospital food." Itachi, who looked quite annoyed if one was able to read the Uchiha's expression, silently followed the hyper-orange wearing boy. The store they had entered wasn't as good as any other stores, but it was one that actually let Naruto in. Why were the other stores so against having Naruto in their shop? Hitsugaya wondered. Shrugging it off, he decided to place this thought on his mental list to ask the Sandaime when they met face to face alone in his Shinigami form. It was most likely that it was just because Naruto was noisy and too hyper. The store's owner and only staff member, that wasn't on lunch break, came from behind rows of odd clothes that Hitsugaya wasn't used to see. The owner had a strange taste in clothes, so similar to a certain woman he knew that he faced everyone. The owner, whose name was Yagami Ran, had strawberry blonde-like color and very distinguished Hitsugaya shuddered at the owner's image. It was like a Matsumoto reincarnation, except at least this one wasn't as lazy as the one he knew. Plus, Ran didn't gap and stare at the strange marking when Tushiru removed. It was something Matsumoto would do. Let's see, something that he'll be comfortable in and maybe something to cover up the lower half of his face. Hitsugaya heard the Hokage of the village he was assigned to say. Before he knew it, Tushiru felt himself get dragged off in a similar fashion that Matsumoto would have done toward a section of mini-sized clothes. After having a random article of clothing tossed at his face, covering up his vision, he was then guided to an empty changing room. Hitsugaya stepped out of the changing room with 4 pairs of eyes staring at him as the door opened. The clothes that the Matsumoto clone had chosen was similar to the uniform that every Shinigami wore. He was just about to nod, saying that he wanted to keep this. After all, who wouldn't feel comfortable in something that they have wore for years? When the owners of the 6 pairs of eyes said that the clothes resemble someone going off to a funeral instead of something someone should wear every day. Once again, Hitsugaya was tossed a pair of clothes and pushed into the changing room. And he came out with a jumpsuit that looked exactly like Naruto's, except the fact that it was a blue color instead orange. Not even giving Naruto the chance to say that it looks like the one he has, Hitsugaya went back to changing clothes. Coming out of the changing room for the 3rd time, Tushiru concluded that this woman and Matsumoto should never meet. This time the outfit was a spandex-like outfit that he had seen some certain crazy person in the village wear. Instead of green, it was a midnight blue. At the same time, Hitsugaya, Itachi, and Sarutobi shivered at the sight. Nope, this was definitely not comfortable. Even in the back of his mindscape, Hitsugaya could hear Hiranmara shiver at the thought that his wielder was to wear something like that, and maybe it was his imagination, but Hitsugaya thought he heard a hint of snickering from Hiranmara. After about 20 changes, Hitsugaya had finally chosen a few simple outfits, 3, that seemed comfortable and action-fitted enough. A simple sleeveless white plain shirt, a long-sleeved black shirt with sleeves that seem a bit too big, a short-sleeved white plain shirt, black cargo pants with a long pants and another one that went up to his knees, a pair of black wristbands that reached slightly over the hands, and a couple of scarves with the colors black, red, blue, dark blue, light blue, and dark green. Itachi-san, do you mind bringing Naruto-kun home while I take Tushiru over to the orphanage? Both the white-haired having people walked away before Naruto or Itachi could complain, and why he should follow the silent and uncompassionate Oni-chan. In Naruto's words, Hitsugaya and Sarutobi could still hear Naruto's voice when they turned the corner. Sarutobi held onto Tushiru's small hands as they walked through the crowded streets as Tushiru led the way to some unknown place. To others, it didn't look odd that a child and a grandpa-like person were taking a stroll down the streets while the older of the two made sure the child wouldn't get lost in the crowded streets. "Where are we going?" The Hokage got no reply from the child. It was until they reached the shabby part of Konoha that he stopped Tushiru in his tracks in front of an extremely shabby candy shop. "Just where are we going? This isn't a place a child should be heading to." And the door of the shabby candy shop flew open. "Irashimasu." Hitsugaya entered the shabby candy shop without even saying anything to the store owner, with the Hokage following the pint-sized Shinigami. He could finally free himself from the mini-sized Gigai. Hitsugaya swallowed a blue spherical candy. "Urahara Kazuki at your service, Hokage-sama." Urahara bowed with his green and white stripe hat. Urahara turned out to be a quite lax candy store owner with clogs and a fan in one hand. "How? No need to ask why. I shall explain later. You may want to put on those glasses that Hitsugaya gave you." Sarutobi took out the ridiculous sunglasses that Tushiru gave him and gave the store owner a skeptical look before putting it on. Blink. Blink. Since when was that white-haired Shinigami there? Did it have to do with the sunglasses that Tushiru gave him? Wasn't the Shinigami the boy in disguise? But Tushiru was sitting at the table, doodling. Once again, the Sandaime was speechless. How did? "Nah, Hitsugaya-kun, you didn't explain it to him, did ya?" Urahara questioned from behind his waving of his fan. "You know about this mission, right? That means I can't tell anyone about Soul Society unless I have permission from Yamamoto Sutaichu. Besides, you can explain it since you're not under the laws of Seireiti." Hitsugaya muttered as he poured himself a cup of green tea. "Ma, sharp as always, nay." Urahara turned to the confused leader of the village. "Where's my manners? Come and sit down. We'll talk over tea." Sarutobi sat across from the apparent Shinigami and took the cup of tea handed to him. Funny, he never did notice that the back of the white haori was the kanji of 10. The long katana was placed next to him. "Let's see. If you want to understand, you'll need to know what Soul Society and Seireiti is." Urahara began his long explanation of Soul Society and Seireiti as Hitsugaya looked bored as he drank his tea and drifted off into a well-needed sleep that he would need before he would need to yell at his unexpected visitor. As Urahara continued to explain, Sarutobi stared at the Shinigami that was nodding off. It was weird seeing someone as young as this dying at an earlier age. From what he learned so far, being a Shinigami was like a shinobi plus paperwork. It was when Urahara finished that he decided to ask, "What's your relation with the Shinigami then?" "Ah, I was once a taiko in Gode Jushantai just like Tushiru here. But I got exiled." The way Urahara sounded when he said that he was exiled was too happy for someone who was exiled. "Oi! Are you done explaining yet, Urahara? You don't need to tell him that I'm a taiko, you know," Hitsugaya said with an annoyed voice after waking up. The more this person knew about Soul Society, the more this person could get in the way. Plus, the Sutaichu did warn him about long-term missions. Don't get attached with living people. Just do your job and everything will be fine when you leave. "Urahara, what are you doing here? I can't believe you managed to hear about this mission." Hitsugaya questioned. He was sure only a handful knew about this. Urahara waved his fan. "I have my ways. By the way, how is your Gigai fitting you?" "There's no way that Kuretsuchi made this. It had to be you. But do you mind giving the manual for the prototype Gigai?" "Kuretsuchi, that bastard, gave me the wrong manual." Hitsugaya mumbled. "I assume you told Sarutobi what he wanted. If you want some training with Bankai, feel free to stop by. Perhaps Sarutobi could give you some training to get used to shinobi action. Maybe it'll be better if you use that function so that you don't need to get out of Gigai every time a hollow would attack," Urahara suggested. "That function? What function are they talking about? And what is a Bankai? Urahara-san only told me about a Shikai." "Maybe, I'll ask him later. I think we've talked long enough, we should get back." Sarutobi stood up and thanked Urahara for the tea and the explanations. "It's been nice meeting you." The explanation helped cleared up some questions. Hitsugaya stood up and entered back into his Gigai. "JYA, I'll stop by for my monthly reports." Both the visitors of the shop exited the candy store. "Ah, Hitsugaya-kun, there's a big package that someone sent to you. I took the chance to take it and deliver it to you," Urahara said from behind his waving of his fan. "I'll send it to Hokage-san's office for you." After the meeting with Urahara, Hitsugaya and Sarutobi decided that it would be best if Hitsugaya stayed at the orphanage to not attract suspicion. And that was what happened for the few weeks as Hitsugaya spent the time riding Konoha of its hollows while trying to detect the source of the leaking Ryotsu with all the use of chakra following around. It was February when Hitsugaya got his first clue as to where the leaking was. You could say that it was just a coincidence, but it was also the reason that he stayed with a certain hyper-blonde 4-year-old. It was a dark night when the incident happened. Naruto was surrounded by drunk shunins in an alley. Hitsugaya just happened to be walking back on his way to the orphanage when he saw it. And there was when he realized why many stores didn't want Naruto in their stores. It was because he was the Kyuubi's container. Of course, Hitsugaya felt sorry and a bit of sympathy and his sense of duty to protect others took over. But the flaw in his planned rescue was that he was in his Gigai. A 1-year-old stood no chance against a group of chunins. From that night, both ended up being treated in the hospital for bruises and cuts. It was at that moment that Hitsugaya realized that the Kyuubi might have something to do with the Ryotsu leaking. It was a fact to higher-ranking Shinigami that the famed tailed beasts had some amount of Ryotsu and the Kyuubi had the strongest out of them all. It was also that night that Hitsugaya decided to take care of Naruto like the way Hinamori and his grandma took care of him when everyone else was afraid of him because of his hair and eyes. Since that night, Hitsugaya decided to live with Naruto to watch over him. It was just a few months, March, after December and spring had made its way to Konoha. It was just another one of those days. Hitsugaya and the Sandane would tackle down Mount Paperwork while Naruto would eat his ramen supply and occasionally whine about boredom. It was a never-ending process in the afternoons. With the weeks, overdue, paperwork done, Hitsugaya could finally tackle this week's pile. When Sarutobi learned about Hitsugaya also having paperwork, he had invited Tushiru over to his office so that both of the Mount Paperwork-driven people could tackle down Mount Paperwork together in a silent place. Sarutobi's expression when he saw the size of the Shinigami's Mount Paperwork was priceless that Hitsugaya couldn't resist but take a photo of the expression for future leverage. Today was just another one of those days except for the tiny interruption midway into the afternoon. The door to the office had flung open, catching the occupants to look up from their work or eating. To Hitsugaya's horror, the opening of the door had spilled ink all over his finished stack of paperwork, ruining it beyond repair. But it was what you get if you sat near the door with the ink bottle opened. The intruder looked up, feeling a chill in the normally warm room. Something horrible will definitely happen soon and the intruder will be right in the middle of the trouble. Omake 2. The Undeniable Evidence, Part 1. To say that Hitsugaya had never had any evidence of embarrassing moments was as if he never had any. And we all know there are moments like Hinamori calling Hitsugaya, Shuru-chan, in front of everyone and the moments of Matsumoto doing the unmentionable thing. But there was this one other incident that Hitsugaya refuses to admit to be true even if the undeniable evidence was published throughout Seirei via the monthly Shinigami Women Association magazine. Let's just say the undeniable evidence just came back from the dead after being destroyed beyond being able to be fixed. After the meeting with Urahara, the Sandame and Hitsugaya, left the shop with all means to not return anytime soon. But if that happened then Hitsugaya would have never seen the undeniable evidence. Hitsugaya and Sarutobi were heading back to the store because Tushiru needed some soma fixers, for his Gigai. Poking their heads back into the shop, they noticed one thing that really freaked them out. It was one thing that both would never forget. Urahara Kazuki was laughing like the mad scientist he is. In his hands was a camera in one hand and a couple of suspicious photos in the other hand. He was too busy looking at the photos to notice that Hitsugaya had come up from behind him to look at what caused the man to act like what he was. Hitsugaya took one look at the photos and immediately his eyebrows started twitching. Whatever the photos captured was definitely not a good thing. Urahara looked up from his evil laughing dream when he noticed a change in temperature and the photos were frozen with a familiar ice. What the Hitsugaya Taiko. What are you doing back here? The former 12th Division Taiko nearly cowered in the icy look that the 10th Division Taiko was giving him. A scary Hitsugaya usually meant a year's supply of snow cones if you didn't get frozen over. A scary Hitsugaya in the special Gigai also meant a pouting Hitsugaya instead of a glaring Hitsugaya. But it was thanks to the Gigai that Urahara didn't face the wrath of the wielder of Hiranmara. This is, so, kawaii. Urahara squealed, n. That word doesn't make a good picture, but feel free to change the word to something that would fit Urahara. This made Hitsugaya scowl even more, which just made him even cuter that Urahara couldn't resist his next few actions. Whipping out his camera that wasn't frozen over yet, he started snapping pictures of the rare moment. Teme. And the pitiful, or not so pitiful, camera was frozen over with ice that only Yamamoto's Zanpakuto could melt, or a month of non-stop sunshine. Just the pitiful pictures. And at the same time, both the camera and the photos shattered into tiny bits of ice, never to walk the material world or any world ever again. Hitsugaya stomped off, or whether stomp as well as a 1-year-old can. He isn't just angry. He was furious that he felt like sending Konoha to another season of coldness if he could. Hitsugaya, didn't you say that you needed something from Ura? The Sandame shrunk in fear at the glare, which was surprising, not childlike anymore. Note to self. Never, no matter what, make the boy beyond furious. But unknown to Hitsugaya or any witnesses, Urahara was indeed crying over his loss. However, it didn't last long before Urahara had his crackling moment. His evil laughter echoed through Konoha and his store, scaring all who heard it. What in the world is he up to? There was one thing no one would dare to even attempt back in Seraiti. And that one thing was destroying Hitsugaya Tushiru's piles of finished paperwork. No one would want to face the wrath of Hiranmara's wielder. Not even Matsumoto would want to find out what would happen if she destroyed the piles of finished paperwork. Sure, she can mess up a few here and there, but the whole number of neat stacks was overkill. But no one knew the true wrath of Hiranmara's wielder in Konoha. Well, all except for Urahara Kazuki if he was still around. The interrupter that had burst in had a certain death wish from a certain Shinigami in the room. The room, of course, was cold, unusual for the time of year they were in, along with a cold, icy glare pointed at the person. Who that person was, Hitsugaya didn't care. As long as that person was frozen into a popsicle stick, that was enough regardless of how important that person might be. It wasn't just the fact that this fool ruined his mount paperwork into a black, soggy mount paperwork from the white, dry mount paperwork. The face and that orange perverted book that he always saw around Sarutobi alone placed him high on his hate list. The glare didn't get ignored by both the fool and the Hokage, especially with the nice supply of air conditioner getting stronger as each second passed. Naruto. Why don't you take Tushiru and get some more ramen? Naruto, being clueless to the dropping temperature, was more than happy that he could get more ramen, while the Sandame was relieved that Tushiru was out of the room before he exploded. Urahara did warn him about Tushiru's icy temper, and he, for one, didn't want to be scraping ice off his walls for the rest of the afternoon and maybe evening. Naruto took Tushiru by the hand and dragged him off to Ichiraku Ramen's, breaking Tushiru out of his murderous glare. He'll face doom if I ever meet him again. You should be glad he didn't castrate you right there. Nah, it's not like the pipsqueak at that age should remember the. Never had Hitsugaya Tushiru ever felt like cursing Kami-sama more than he did with Matsumoto, 10 times the amount he ever did. Ever since he could walk out in the streets without Naruto or Sarutobi by his side, he was having the worst luck there was with some unknown person. He only caught glimpses of that person. Grayish, gravity-defying hair. Black clothes. An orange book that looked awfully familiar. A black mask covering up to the person's nose. Definitely male. And a few other details that didn't deemed important. But he had never met this person. Everything was just a few glimpses. That person was going to get it if he ever meets him face to face. Why? That person would always leave behind a trail of destruction just for him. Incident number 1. It was just an ordinary street with ordinary people that all shared the same chances of having a bottle of pink hair dye spill on them. But no, it just had to fall on him out of all the other ordinary people on the ordinary street. That was the reason why he spent 2 whole weeks with hot pink hair. The worst part was that he knew that Urahara couldn't pass up on such a photo, and it meant being in public with the hideous hair. Not to mention that it was also the time of the year when he had to attend the numerous meetings back in Seireiti. The whole Soul Society would know about his little hair problem, and a hat wouldn't do any good to hide the hair, especially in the back. Curse the guy who tipped over the hair dye. Incident number 2. There was only one thing that was good about Konoha's unbearable weather. It was great for his secret watermelon patch that only he and Naruto knew that existed. Or it was his secret watermelon patch untouched by others except himself. Not even Naruto could touch his precious watermelon without promising not to harm them. But for some reason on a hot summer day, he arrived at his watermelon patch that no longer looked like a watermelon patch anymore. Watermelons smashed, vines destroyed, watermelons missing more than the vandalized ones, soil scattered all over the ground, water puddles every 2 feet, and worst of all, it meant none of his watermelons for quite a while before he could eat them again. It was the worst time ever. The heat was getting to him since Soul Society didn't have summer this hot. How was he supposed to survive the summer? Damn the guy who trashed his precious watermelons. Incident number 3. Never had he ever panicked for misplacing Hiranmara. He had just placed it down for a minute to take a shower, but when he came back, not a sign of Hiranmara was in sight. After the entire day spent looking for the not-so-ordinary katana, Hitsugaya found Hiranmara back in its respectful place with a few more dents more than usual. Not like it was his fault. After some deep mediation, Hitsugaya had found out that someone had taken the katana while he was showering and used it for a katana-only spar. Not only did Tushiro had to do some major repairing, the guy who borrowed Hiranmara never said thanks, let alone asked for permission to touch Hiranmara. Screw the guy who borrowed Hiranmara without him knowing. Incident number 4. For once in his life he was glad that he knew what a hangover could do to a person and what to do when one would get one of those annoying hangovers. Sometime last night, Hitsugaya was working late again to finish some paperwork that was urgent. A full cup of green tea sat innocently by his paperwork where he could easily reach when he needed a sip. And he never knew what hit him. That so-called innocent cup of green tea was actually a cup of the substance that Matsumoto drinks along with her drinking buddies. Not to mention, the sake just happened to be one of the strong ones too. And that was the situation he found himself with early in the morning, with a hangover that he never knew that could be possible with him. To hell with the guy who switched his precious green tea with substance that Matsumoto drinks along with her drinking buddies. Incident number 5. Why? That was the single thought that passed through Hitsugaya's mind for the last hour. Why? Why was his precious books targeted by a supreme pervert? The books, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Being a Ninja, Top 100 Ways to Get Better in Acting Like a Child. What Not to Do in the Company of Ninja. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Acting Like a Child. Plus a bunch of other books that Urahara kindly lent to him, was currently missing. They were interesting enough as long as you get past all the idiotic comments that repeats itself to clarify for the pure idiots. But anyway, none of those books were spared from the supreme pervert that decided that it was fun to switch all the books, leaving only the book covers behind, with a series of Icha Icha Paradise in the place of the borrowed books. Why was this happening to him? Unleash the horrifying women that beat peeking toms from the onsen upon that perverted guy that switched his precious books with dirty perverted books. He'll be sure to have a camera and an innocent child face when the time came. Incident number 6. He would never admit that he and Naruto would get lost in Konoha. After all, he rarely gets lost unless it was an unknown area with people that wouldn't cooperate to tell him where he is, and Naruto was born in Konoha. There's no way someone could get lost in their home village. But for some reason, the two did get lost. It wasn't until Tushiro noticed some things that he recognized. Things that were around the areas that he was went to drag some of his subordinates, and this time it wasn't Matsumoto out of. This time, it wasn't his subordinates that needed to get out of the red light district. How he got there? He had no idea. Apparently, it was someone's sick idea to dump 2 children in the red light district without a clue of where they were. It was worse when people started staring, wondering why 2 underage were doing there. But the worst was when women, he shuddered at that thought, came over and started asking what they were doing here in their motherly way. After getting out there alive, Hitsugaya swore that he would do whatever he could do to dump the idiot, who dumped them in that god-forsaken place, into a Hiranmara-made ice trap designed especially for that bastard. Incident number 7. He didn't know how this could happen. One moment he was doing his paperwork peacefully under a tree outside with Naruto, who was attempting to aim a kunai at a random tree branch, and the next thing he knew, he was dodging a flaming kunai that didn't come from Naruto. Someone was practicing somewhere on one of those nearby training areas. The only bad result from dodging the ablazed kunai was losing the only defense that his paperwork had. Within a couple of seconds, his paperwork of 3 days was burnt crisped on the ground. His paperwork didn't stand a chance against the damned kunai from some evil training shinobi that couldn't aim correctly and has a grudge against written reports, casualty reports, investigation reports, etc. If he was Matsumoto, then he would have been extremely happy, but seeing that he isn't Matsumoto, it was obvious that he was beyond upset. Upset enough that he was willing to freeze the ass off the person who threw the kunai and had no control over where it went. Incident number 8. There was always a reason why he never did like going to an onsen with anyone. With Matsumoto, it meant being, somehow, dragged into the female's side with the excuse of not being old enough to be alone. With Yukitaki, it meant being pampered by him. With Hinamori, it meant being teased. Overall, it was annoying to go in the first place even when he went alone. It was great for relaxing, but the heat was horrible. The current situation he got himself in consisted of being dropped in the middle of the women's side of the onsen by some twisted person that decided he needed a break. It was a good thing that someone else, who happened to look more perverted and more satisfying to hit, dropped in just when horrifying, fist-wielding women started to surround him. Never mess with women bathing, especially if they were skilled kunoichi. It was even scarier than the ones back in Soul Society. Incident number 9. He had no idea how he ended up cross-dressing. One moment on the street, he was wearing his usual casual clothes and next, he and a couple of other people were wearing extremely feminine clothes. I'll leave the clothes to your imagination. There were multiple flashes of blinding light, leaving Hitsugaya blinking in confusion. It wasn't until the next day that the unfortunate victims realized what the flashes of light were. They were everywhere. The academy, the Hokage's office, the hospital, the onsen, and practically every corner and hole in the village. It was like Naruto's pranks to the extreme. Photos from yesterday's incident were posted everywhere, including one place that Tushiru never thought it would reach. After some threatening phone calls to Matsumoto, which took a while because of her giggling non-stop, he had found out that an anonymous person dropped it off in the Shinigami Women Association's fans box. Incident number 10. There was always this one resemblance that puzzled everyone in Konoha. Hitsugaya Tushiru and some Junin that he had never met before. There were many rumors about the possibilities, but none had ever caught the attention of both subjects of the rumors. At least until one day, Hitsugaya overheard a conversation between the Green Beast of Konoha and someone he couldn't see. It went somewhat like this. Green spandex guy. My rival, I've noticed someone in the streets lately. The person around the corner. Green spandex guy. There's a mini you hanging around. Have you taken on a student that is inspired by your fashion? The person around the corner. Green spandex guy. Or have you shared your springtime of youth with your special person? The person around the corner. Green spandex guy. That must be it. I didn't know you had the boldness to do such a thing. The person around the corner. Green spandex guy. I must find the others. The person around the corner. Huh, you said something? And that was how he learned of the rumors that existed in the village. Of course, the rumors were corrected with the threatening cold atmosphere around Tushiru when someone dared to ask. Incident number 11. Maybe it was the 10th Division's paperwork to be ruined in all sorts of ways possible, including the excuse, a dog ate it, or maybe it was the ink that was delicious. But the result was the same. Hitsugaya's paperwork was gone. Every time he left the papers only for just a few minutes, to get more green tea, they end up chewed on. This continued for days as he changed inks, paper, brush, desk, and place. The criminals of the crime turned out to be a couple of ninja dogs. To his dismay, the dogs never left him alone, and he had to protect his precious paperwork by locking them up and laying traps every time he left the room, even if it was for a few minutes. Incident number 12. For the entire time Hitsugaya was in Konoha, he had thought that he had escaped Yukitaki's gifts, but it seemed like he didn't when he found a basket of candy, which was gobbled down by Naruto, on the doorsteps. It was annoying at first, thinking that it was Yukitaki sending the candy. Yet, when he asked the man about it, it really wasn't who he thought it was. Although, The bad thing about asking was that Yukitake thought that he missed the occasional candies and had insisted on sending him some in the future. That left the mystery of who would dare send him candy. They could have sent watermelons instead. Naruto halted to a stop from his chase with the Chunins sent after him for painting the Hokage's stone faces. It wasn't like he was caught by anyone yet. But the person in front of him clearly meant that it was just about over for him. Tushiru has that annoyed face on. The end. Now we will see you in the next video.